14 days out from the election, polls suggest a coming red wave. Yahya Sinwar, a senior Hamas official in Gaza, has been eliminated as Israel prepares to strike back for Iran's ballistic missile attack. And finally, North Korean troops are training in Russia as World War III by proxy begins to escalate. Welcome to Inside Israel News, your home for American conservative commentary on international affairs and thorough and unbiased analysis of Israeli news, politics, and current events in the Middle East. Or as the internet trolls say, mouthpiece of the Zionist conspiracy, spokesman for the elders of Zion, highly paid propagandist of the Mossad. Yeah, no. This is Inside Israel News. I'm your host, Isaac Kite. Welcome back, Insiders. It is I, Isaac Kite, your president interlocutor, your mad genius, your gregarious Vulcan, your prophet of things to come, your shadow president. And many, many fun things to talk about today. Some good news, some bad. World War III by proxy is continuing to go. It's escalating. Shows you, what a great job the current administration is doing of combating our enemies and keeping the predators in their place. Well, anyway, you can tell what kind of respect they have for the present administration, for sure. So, I'm going to talk about a little bit of U.S. politics, a little bit of U.S. news. Just get a couple things, actually something kind of funny, actually. But anyway, get a couple of those things out of the way, get over to the Israeli news, talk about that, and then dive into the final segment, the international news, and talk about World War III by proxy, which has gotten a lot more exciting now that North Korea has become involved, and more on that here in just a minute. I do want to take a minute. We just celebrated Yom Kippur, if celebrated is the right word. We observed it. For Jews, it's a day of atonement and fasting, and a time for introspection and thinking about what you can do better, how you can be a better person yourself, for sure. But there's more to it than that. It's also, in my opinion, how we can be better community, how we can be better families, how we can be a better nation. And I spent some time during the fast thinking on all of these matters, but especially on the national point. Up till recently, we as a nation, and when I say nation, I'm referring to the Jewish people everywhere in the world, but including Israel, which is where half of us live. We have missed the mark. That's what sin means, right? Misdeeds, but also things that you could have gotten better, right? We have definitely missed the mark. We have made a massive error. We have allowed ourselves to become complacent. We allowed ourselves to coexist with evil, a terrible and great evil right over the security fence in Gaza, and also to a significant degree in Judea and Samaria, which the international media erroneously calls the West Bank. West Bank of what? We're not sure yet. But anyway, so this is, and I want to articulate this carefully. It's like, we had terrorism throughout the history of Israel, but lately, especially since the 80s with the rise of the Iranian regime, these proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, Israel has coexisted with them. And yes, they've combated them in the past and, various security operations that weakened them here and there. But we have allowed them to exist. And we have, again, with October 7th, obviously security was fairly lax. We have become complacent. And so there is this moral question we have to answer, that we allowed this evil to exist, right next to us. And we coexisted with it, and we tolerated it. And on one day, on October 7th, on Shmini Atzeret, Simchat Torah, right, on our holiday, also Shabbat, they attacked, and they raped, and they murdered, and they killed children, and they tortured people, and they committed horrors. Things that in past episodes, even before October 7th, I had talked about. What would happen if Hamas had access to Israeli civilians? already covered that. I hate that kind of, my joke of prophet of things to come. You don't have to be much of a prophet to see this. You just have to know who you're talking about. But this is what happened. I talked about it. I said it would happen. Bam, it happened. Pretty much exactly the way that I said it would. And it was horrific, truly horrific. So even though it was they who committed the crimes, we still have to think about, as a nation, why we tolerated that. And we can't go back in time and change any of that, right? It was different with the pogroms in the late 19th century. With the Holocaust, Jews were dispersed in small communities. We didn't have power. We didn't have control over our own destiny. There were efforts at different times by different Jewish groups to try to mitigate that, to try to improve the conditions. But in any case, we didn't have a lot of power then. Now we have a nation of our own and the ability to make our own decisions and to act for our own preservation. And that means we have to be cognizant of the fact that we have a moral duty to protect ourselves, and we have the power to do it, and we have to use that power right. And while, like I said, we can't go to the past and undo it, we do have the opportunity to go forward and think about the future. And the key lesson I think we draw from that, if I may offer just this brief Yom Kippur sermon. This is a day of atonement and fasting, like I said, and introspection, as we think about, not just as individuals, but now I'm talking about as a nation as a whole. It's time for that to end. It's time to go after our enemies, to go hunt them down, to destroy them. In Gaza, this has been done very well. And now with Hezbollah, with the attack by Iran, no more ceasefires. No more, getting the job, 20% done and walking away. We need to win. Israelis need to live in security. Jews around the world need to be safe. And if they're not safe, they need to have a safe Israel to go to. Jews are having to flee Europe now. It's like we need a safe place to go. So it's time to stop compromising with evil. It's time to stop negotiating with evil. It's time to end the ceasefires. It's time to destroy it, to root it out, to utterly obliterate it, to make sure that these organizations, Hezbollah and Hamas, are utterly destroyed and not able to rise again, and, go from there. I'll talk a little bit more about some of that later on. I just wanted to add this thought, right? As a nation, this is something we could do better. And so let us be resolved to win the wars and not to play the anti-Semites game of, they hurt us and then we fight back and then we can't finish the job so that they can hurt us again. We couldn't stop October 7th. It's already in the past, but we can make sure the next one doesn't happen. And so that's what I wanted to say. Some of the things that were on my mind as we observed Yom Kippur, thinking on a national scale, obviously, each of us individually has to think about how we can be better people. Families have to think about how they can do a better job of doing different things, observing Torah and what have you, and also communities, how they can do better. But as a nation, I think that's our prerogative, maintaining security, maintaining safety, and not compromising. Now, with that said, there I was in my humble, introspective mood on Yom Kippur, and the observance ended, and start getting slowly recovering from the fast and getting back to life as normal. And as I did all of that, and I'm very humble, and my head has shrunk down a little bit. I'm in that right mood, and then events happen that prove that things that I've been saying for over a year now are right. That I'm very, very right. That has not been good for my ego. So I'm afraid the Yom Kippur humility is gone now that North Korea is getting. A year ago, after October 7th, I started talking about how Iran and Russia were coordinating, that Iran's attack, that they're using their proxies to attack Israel, was to distract from what was going on in Ukraine, that it was benefiting Russia. The Iranians were already sending weapons to Russia. Russia was sending weapons to Iran. They were already, exchanging things. They were already working together to a certain degree as allies, and then there you go. And of course, anything that taxes our supply chains, getting air defense missiles to Israel and Ukraine, we don't have enough, and that's been a big problem. And the more that is chewed up there, of course, the fewer air defenses and fewer supplies are available, to defend Taiwan or South Korea, right? As we get spread thinner and thinner, as we have to rebuild our manufacturing. Anyway, all of this stuff. So I've been talking about this World War III by proxy of the Axis forces of Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea coordinating, to a lesser extent Venezuela too, coordinating and working together and helping one another. And they have been, exchanging weapons, laundering technology, whatever it takes. They've been helping each other. And so I started calling them the Axis forces last year, and I began talking about their coordination. I began talking about what I call World War III by proxy, what Neil Ferguson and others call Cold War II. It's not very cold. There's a direct assault on the rules-based international order and on U.S. Prestige and authority in the world. Our interests are directly under assault. Right? We are being attacked, but they can't attack us directly. We're too powerful. But they can attack our allies and overextend our supply chains, and they can chew up our weapons, and they can grind us down and weaken our power, weaken our resolve, which is already weak, so that they can gain power. And we've seen the barbarism of Russia and the atrocious crimes they've committed in Ukraine. We've seen the barbarism of Iran's proxies and the Iranian government itself. We have seen the horrors that they have perpetrated, and they would love, the Axis powers would love nothing more than to perpetrate them on others, right? On South Korea, on Taiwan, wherever they can go, okay? So, I'm right. Over the course of the year, I started talking about that. Boris Johnson came out, the former Prime Minister of Britain, said the same thing shortly after I started talking about it. Or rather, he may have published it. I read the article after I published an episode where I'd started talking about this. So I'm not going to claim to be the first one to come up with the idea. I'm just saying I've been talking about this for a year now. And slowly but surely, podcasts like The Goodfellas have caught on. And we've slowly gotten, gained a greater awareness. People have become cognizant of this fact. They've been slow to it, all right? But I was right there on the cutting edge. So, that's how you guys get the best analysis. To the insiders, to you, the very special, the elite, the most erudite, you guys are well informed. And that's so I'm grateful that you listen, but I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, because as this is happening, we've had lots of people coming back, different commentators around Europe and around the world. Oh, there's no evidence of coordination between these powers. They're not really allies. Calling them the Axis isn't really accurate. They're marriage of convenience maybe, and this kind of thing. Yeah. North Korean troops are fighting on Russia's behalf against Ukraine. That is not, that's not a lack of coordination. That's very coordinated. They are working together. And like I said, I've been talking about this for a year now, and you guys know it, right? You guys know the truth, and you guys are ahead of the curve. So just wanted to mention. All right. So a few thoughts on entertainment real quick before I go into the American commentary. And then, at least one part of that I get to be a little entertaining, I hope. There's life mimics art, art mimics life. I know a lot of people like the Yellowstone series, and it's been okay. There are things I don't like about it. Human life is pretty cheap, and there's a lot of violence. And if you watch it, you get the impression that everyone in Montana is a meth head or a neo-Nazi or something, but that's not true. Anyway, it's certainly an interesting series. And Mr. Hauser, who plays Rip, was on the cover of Cigar Aficionado magazine, one of my favorite magazines. So it was really interesting seeing him there, reading his story with cigars and how he got on the show and things like that. But another show by the same creator is Tulsa King. I'm a big fan of Tulsa King. I've loved, watching Sylvester Stallone. I grew up watching his movies and that kind of thing. Sly is a really, really good actor, and I love The Expendables. Glad to see him back on the screen. and I've really enjoyed the show. They make really good entertainment. Life isn't quite as cheap in that show, maybe, as it is in Yellowstone, but it's also kind of fun. The characters are interesting, and I live near Tulsa, so I like the theme of it. Well, in this show, and I don't want to give too many spoilers, but there's a guy who's got he's human trafficking these Chinese workers who are working on growing marijuana and this kind of thing, basically slave labor. Well, recently in Oklahoma, they busted a marijuana farm which was using Chinese slave labor run by Chinese Communist Party / gangs. Basically, the CCP controls organized crime in China. So that was again, life mimics art, right? Just watching the show about this stuff and for entertainment, and then bam, there's a headline in the news that's like, yep, that's actually happening. There you are. So that was a fascinating thing. Anyway, Tulsa King's a lot of fun. If you've got Paramount Plus, you can go watch it there. I enjoy that very much, and it's been good. It's been good. Also, Good Intentions. My friend Bob Zeidman, great book. Been enjoying it. Like I said, I read so many things that are very cerebral and intellectual, so you don't have to. There's if you want to, you're welcome to. There are lots of great books out there. I'm going through a lot of Neil Ferguson's books right now, but they're very cerebral or whatever. Sometimes I like to read something that's just fun. Bob Zeidman's got some fun books. Good Intentions is one of them. Kind of takes wokeness to it's logical, if there is a logical conclusion. A world where trans fat is a controlled substance, and this kind of stuff. Great book. And he also has Animal Lab, another great one, kind of an update of Animal Farm by Orwell. And he has the newsletter, Good Intentions newsletters. Check out Bob Zeidman's works, Good Intentions and Animal Lab and the Good Intentions newsletter. Those are a lot of fun. So you get good information and little lighthearted entertainment, political stories and that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's kind of stuff that entertains me, I guess. I don't know what other people like. All right, U.S. news. So polls are looking increasingly like we're headed toward a red wave. Now, I want to say once again, because I've always cautioned, I don't believe polls. It's just a scientific means of analyzing public opinion. And in America, we've seen a lot of polls over the last few years that have just been, off the walls, right? Especially in 2020 and in 2022. Now, so in 2022, it looked like there was a red wave. And at the last minute, with student loans, with, border security, they ran a bunch of ads saying the Democrats supported border security, which they don't. But they lied, and people believed them enough that just by a narrow margin, and of course, the GOP was divided, had mixed messages coming from different candidates, the establishment and the Senate candidates and campaigns running one way, and Donald Trump and his endorsees running the other. And with all of that, it blunted the red wave. It really did. And Republicans did play into it. That could have been done better by far. It was a mistake. Now, all the people, a bunch of Trump's candidates lost. Actually, a lot of the candidates he endorsed won, hundreds of them. So that's not something to talk about. But anyway, people always, they try to come up with some excuse to go against, the people that we like, if we support a candidate or what have you. Anyway, Trump wasn't responsible for the blunting of the red wave, but the mixed messages certainly didn't help. Okay, so we saw a lot of polls headed into 2022, though, that looked good, right? And at the last minute, you could kind of see them turning a little bit. And of course, on Election Day, things did not come out quite the way that was anticipated. Obviously, the GOP did take over the House and made gains here and there, but not enough to make any meaningful difference. And of course, lost a seat in the Senate, which didn't help, right? Some important governorships, Arizona, for example. And that wasn't a good thing. But this year, they seem to be having a harder time on the left, holding all that together. The person at the top of the ticket is imploding. Left-wing news outlets, Time is going after Kamala Harris for not interviewing with them. There's a lot of dissent on that side. There's the orange man bad, so people are still going to vote that way, but they're not on the same page. And there's no connection between their candidate at the top of the ticket and the American people, right? You look at atrocious candidate, but at least Bernie Sanders was able to get a movement. Like, a lot of people supported him. He really did win that primary in 2016. They had to rig it for Hillary just to get her across the finish line, right? Flipping coins and, all this kind of stuff in the primaries there. But he at least had a connection with someone. There was some base of Democrats out there who supported him. And there's nothing like that for the person at the top of the ticket now. Kamala Harris does not have any kind of popular support, right? She was selected. They tried to prop up Joe Biden, which was their best chance at winning the election, and he just couldn't quite do it, right? We knew he wasn't mentally fit to run in 2020, but they managed to get him over the finish line. And this year, I think they hoped that they could kind of quietly squeak him through. Didn't work out that way. In any case, the polls are looking good. GOP is looking good in the House, looking like they could gain somewhere in the order of 12 to 15 seats, maybe as many as 20. I always, with a grain of salt, take these polls with a grain of salt, as I always say. And it's not quite like Israel's proportional system where you can get a ballpark idea of where people are going. These races are head-to-head, right? So it's a matter of who turns out and who gets more votes than the other person. You're looking for something much more specific, right? And accuracy is important. But, Trafalgar, Rasmussen, Atlas, some of the more accurate pollsters coming out with polls, and that's how it's looking. And at least in the Electoral College at the moment, Donald Trump is pretty close to the 312. Different people have different metrics and different models on that, but he looks to be winning most of the battleground states, and he's expanded the field of battleground states. I mean, New Mexico, Minnesota, Virginia, these are real battleground states this year. They haven't been for some time, right? I mean, Minnesota is usually close, but they have the votes to get over the top, right? So it ends up being a blue state at the end of the day. In Virginia, they're clearing the voter rolls. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. In any case, so Trump looks to be leading, and we're, less than 20 days out from the election. We're in the final weeks. That's the direction things are trending. Undecided seem to be leaning in his general direction, and that's going there. And of course, there isn't the excuse of COVID to do the mail-in ballots after the election day and all this kind of nonsense, and stuff a bunch of illegal votes into drop boxes and stuff like that. So, we're going to have less of that. There'll still be some, but we'll have less of it this go round. Anyway, so that's how things are looking there. The Senate, GOP is looking good. Ted Cruz looks good in Texas, and obviously Justice looks good in West Virginia. So that's right there is half the Senate that the GOP would have, and Sheehy is ahead in Montana, which would give the GOP an outright majority. Obviously, if Trump wins the presidency, the vice president, J.D. Vance, would give the Senate majority to the Republicans. In any event, so we're looking at that. That's kind of the GOP majority in the Senate right now. And it's different. You look at different betting odds calculations that are done there, and it's like 70-74% that the GOP will control the Senate. Well, now we're getting polls that GOP candidates are ahead in Ohio, Wisconsin, possibly Michigan as well, and the Senate race in Pennsylvania is tied. Right? Most of the polls are coming out. Some show Casey in the lead, but McCormick is right there with him. So there is every opportunity that the GOP could gain not just the 2 seats that would give them a majority, but 4 or 5 more. Right? Election's also close in Arizona, so I mean, there could be quite a few seats there. So that's the direction things look to be going. I'm always skeptical, and Like I've told you guys before on the show this year, even if I had evidence of a red wave, I would be cautious and I would not take it for granted. So don't take it for granted, but things are looking in that general direction. And that's going into the analysis globally. Trump's opinions and the statements on international affairs, what the Chinese, the Russians, the North Koreans, and the Iranians expect from him, so on and so forth. There's just kind of a growing awareness that January 20th things are gonna flip back to the way they were under Trump the first time. So he's looking like he could be the Grover Cleveland of our 21st century, which is interesting because I wrote an article to that effect in January of 2021. That Trump had a really good opportunity to come back and win a non-consecutive second term. It's only happened once before with Grover Cleveland, and back in the 19th century, in 1892, he won a victory, and then we promptly had a depression, and that kind of muted his presidency. But in any case, hopefully we won't go there again. Although the economy is showing some stress, some strain under current circumstances. So be really good to have someone who's going to lower taxes, lower the cost of energy, and give us a boost. Fight government spending so that we can get inflation down, so on and so forth. Okay. Anyway, you get my point. You take my meaning. Things are headed in that general direction. All right. Let's talk about the other side. So, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson is on some kind of power trip. Like the entire city school board has resigned. All of his appointees over his own failures. And now he says he's going to appoint a new group. And there's this video of him, this is about a mayoral authority. Wow. Talk about a power trip. So, these people, like Rahm Emanuel tried to clean up Chicago. He tried to close schools that were, underpopulated so that they could focus the funding on those schools that had enough students, right? And then you'd have better resources, maintenance, all that kind of thing. He tried trimming the budget a little bit. He tried refocusing resources to try to clean the city up. And they ran him out of town, right? Get rid of him. And then there was the less said of Lightfoot, the better. She was unceremoniously booted, right? And she didn't have the public support to get anywhere near winning re-election. So now they've got, Brandon Johnson over there doing this. So Chicago is a failed state. It's a failed city, right? The city government is a complete catastrophe. And my friends, I can't help but take an opportunity to jest with you a little, forsooth, right? Why don't we change the mayor, the city government structure in Chicago? I have an idea. Let's just hand power in Chicago over to the gangs. At this point, the gangs have they're better organized, they're better funded, they know how to turn a profit, apparently, because, they're making money, and they're better able to control their territories than the police are. So, if we're going to have somebody up there who's going to be a dictator and have a power trip in Chicago, let's just hand it over to the gangs, my friends. Just let them run it. We'll start a coalition government between the Bloods and the Crips, or whatever gangs they have there. I'm afraid I'm just not up on my terminology, but coalition government of all the different gangs and mob bosses and whatever in Chicago, and just let them run the place. It couldn't be any worse at this point, right? It couldn't be any greater disaster than the current situation. The level of incompetence of these people on the other side, I don't know. How can you live in Chicago or anywhere in Cook County? My God. Anyway, so it's a funny thing I thought I'd bring out. You get these kinds of stories, and it's ridiculous. The whole government is collapsing. And the state of Illinois has long since, the state really can't do anything about it. They don't really have the resources to go in there and try to clean the place up. And South Chicago is a disaster zone. The education, the city services, like I said, I think the gangs could run it better. So that's just me. And that's what I have to say about that. Holy mackerel. and the less said of California, the better. They're not going to let Elon increase the number of launches from California because of his political posts on X. It's like, these people are so petty and so full of themselves. But they're also dangerous. People who are power hungry generally are. All right, so on a lighter note, recently Ryan McBeth shared a video talking about layered air defense using a crayon-drawn diagram that apparently he now has for sale. So go check that out on ryanmcbeth.com, or follow his links to check up on that kind of stuff. Anyway, and of course the thing that was being protected in the diagram was Jewish weather machine, and I couldn't help but we need to have a little laugh. Apparently Jews caused the hurricanes, and we caused the weather and all of this kind of thing. And I thought you guys should understand better our thought processes in all this stuff. And so there we were, the last elders meeting. We're planning these hurricanes, Helene and Milton. Of course, they didn't have those names at the time. Honestly, I think we should name them something more interesting, like, Death Spiral, or, Darth Vader, Megatron. If you gave hurricanes names like that, people wouldn't, stay in their towns. They'd evacuate. Yeah, Darth Vader's coming. Yeah, I'm evacuating. I'm going. I'm not trying to stick this one out. Anyway, so, we were planning all that, and poor Chaim jumped up. It's like, look, I run the insurance industry, the whole insurance industry. You know how much money I'm going to lose when these hurricanes come through? And, he'd no sooner finished his sentence than the Rothschilds jumped in, and they're like, hey, guys, we run the banking industry. All these mortgages and there's business loans and corporate loans. God, it's going to be a disaster. We're going to lose a whole bunch of money. There's no way we're going to recover from this quickly. And we're all sitting there, and it's like, so... we're supposedly Jews and we worship money. How can we send hurricanes that cause all this destruction and cost us so much money? Oh, it was such a difficult thing, and it was a really tough decision to turn on the weather machine and send the hurricanes through. But we just decided that every now and then you just got to shake the sandbox a little bit, just shake things up, cause all kinds of consternation for no very good reason. Just we're in a bad mood. Somebody's upset. Somebody had a bad day, and we all just decided we were going to go for it. All jokes aside, my friends, Jews do not control the weather. We don't make hurricanes. Hot water, moisture evaporates. When you have air moving in a cyclone, it picks up that moisture, forms a storm. They've been happening for millennia, millions of years. Okay, it's the weather. All right, we're not in control of that, and we don't have secret space lasers either. I'll be assured. Even though, as director of the Electric Eye division of the Secret Jewish Space Lasers Agency, I know all the things that are going on. So, Sam in Cincinnati, Ohio, you know what you've done. I was watching. You go put it back. Come on. You know better. Behave yourself. And Susan, we need to talk. I mean, really, all the sneaking around, he's not worth it. Okay? Just want you to know. Anyway, now that I've talked to you guys and told you guys, some of these things, we get all the juicy gossip, right? Because we're watching everything. We got the secret space lasers and whatever. So if you tick us off, don't mess with the Jews, or, we're going to use our secret space lasers to cause impotence in the population, and we're going to make No Nut November a real thing. Anyway, if the world were run by a Jewish conspiracy, it would be much better run. My friends, it really would. We'd all be in better shape. We have the top scientists, we have the top economists, we have, some of the greatest diplomats and leaders in the world. Not all, but, if Jewish people were really pulling the strings, the world would be so much better run. And, we'd all be eating our bagels and lox and chilling out. So, anyway, thought I'd lighten things up just a little bit there. Ryan McBeth with his air defense, showing our layered air defense to protect our weather machines. So anyway, with that, I'm going to end this segment and jump on to the Israeli news. Visit the Inside Israel News store on Etsy to get your swag and support the show at the same time. You can get the Promised Land shirt or the Now You're Messing with the Son of a Mensch shirt or other interesting swag, phone cases, and such at the store. Go to Etsy, look up Inside Israel News, or you can go to the website, insideisrael.news, and click on the image of the store, of the items for sale. Get your swag and show your support for Israel today. So Yahya Sinwar is the latest victim of Israel's ongoing leadership elimination card game. Right? We're getting all the players. We're getting all the jokers, the kings, the queens, and aces and whatever, right? Anyway, Israel has done an incredible job this year showing what we are capable of doing, what ingenuity can do. Because I just have to say, the pager thing with Hezbollah, brilliant. Right, get those pagers in there, with small explosives in them, get the battery to overheat, boom goes the pager, and a lot of people disabled or dead who would otherwise have been in command and control in Hezbollah, right? And so everyone who was important is gone. The leader Nasrallah is gone. All of these top level people, in fact, the deputy leader, the guy, no one wants the top job now, right? The number 2 guy fled to Iran because he doesn't want to be next. But he may have forgotten that, Ismail Haniyeh was killed in Iran. So, sleep tight, okay? All right. But yet again, the tunnel rat who was commanding their, Hamas in Gaza has been killed, caught with a bunch of foreign money on him, and all this kind of stuff. His wife has nice expensive bag that she's walking around with, and some of the videos we have of him, just living it up while Gazans are dying, as Israel has to fight Hamas. All he had to do was surrender and hand over the hostages, and that would have been that, right? And the people of Gaza would be in a different situation. But no, that's not what they wanted. Sinwar himself said that he would sacrifice 100,000 Gazans if it meant that they could make Israel look bad, right? It's all for the cause, right? These people, wow, All right, so I'm going to take the big chunk of the segment here real quick to talk about Israel's options to strike back at Iran. And the first thing about all that is the leak. Oh my God. Like I said in the last episode, Israel doesn't share its plans with the U.S. because the plans keep being leaked. Oh my God. Some traitor in the Biden administration leaked satellite images of Israel's preparations for the attack and information about some of the exercises Israel's performing to plan and prepare for the attack. Funny thing, why doesn't Israel share its plans with the U.S.? There you go. That's why. Because they end up being leaked to our enemies. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so this now that Iran knows some information about what Israel is planning, we'll see what the IDF has up its sleeves. They'll have to maybe adjust the plan slightly to change it to do this or that. I made a walking video and I talked about what I would do. This is a unique opportunity after the ballistic missile attack. I've talked about in the past the strategic value of Israel to the Arabs of being able to take out Iran's proxies. If Israel can take out Iran's proxies, then Israel proves that it is worthy of the support of its Arab allies, right? That it has the strength. Right? They're not going to, end this conflict and just turn things over and make peace for nothing. Like, they want to know that they are, hitching themselves to a winning team here, right? They want to win. And if Israel can defeat Iran, then the Arabs will owe Israel quite a bit. So this is a unique opportunity. And that's why, as I talked about in the walking video, I say we hit it all, right? Israel can hit their command and control, hit bunkers where Ali Khamenei might be, top-level officials can be eliminated, hit critical communication centers that would allow the army and Iranian military to respond and react to the attack, things like that. That would weaken the regime, show that it is vulnerable. Kind of like with the fall of the Soviet Union and other dictatorships, once people understand that there is an alternative, right, then they rise up. I mean, they can get rid of the dictator. There's that great story of Kosciuszko, right? And he's in the big square in Bucharest in Romania in 1989. He goes out to speak to the people, and he's giving them this speech and whatever. And of course, he's been in power using fear and terrorism and manipulation for all these years. And then, some old lady yells, "Liar!" And then pretty soon 10 people are chanting "liar," and then 100, and then 1,000, and then he's getting the heck out of there. You know what I mean? Like, it's time to go before they hang me. Right. So once people realize that there is an alternative, they might rise up, and the Iranian people would have a chance to go after the regime if it were befuddled. If the leadership is cut off, if communications are cut, it'll take them a while to, if they're caught with their pants down, let's just say, it takes them a while to pull their pants back up and get themselves reorganized and sorted out. Who's going to be in charge, right? Raisi was one of the major challengers for leadership as the president, but he's dead, right? And now there are a couple of different options, right? There's Khamenei's son. There's a couple of other people who want to be in power, so they have to sort themselves out, make concessions to all the army people, get everybody on the same page, and then they could go put down protests. But if there are big protests or whatever, they might push them all out of power before they are able to establish a successor. Second, the nuclear program. Secretary Blinken is out there, U.S. Secretary of State, saying that Iran might be, 2 weeks away from the ability to build an atomic bomb, a nuclear weapon. And we know they have ballistic missiles to deliver these. So, hit the nuclear facilities, get all those bunkers. Even if you don't get everything, you just set them back quite a bit. Whatever Israel can do to prevent Iran from developing a bomb and weaponizing it, making it deliverable, that is, as quickly as possible, right? And then finally, there's Karg Island, right? The oil output is something like 90% of Iran's oil flows out through there. Iran's also laundering oil for Russia, helping them overcome the sanctions we all have on them. Allies do that for each other. A lot of mutual back scratching and greasing of palms. So, might be a great opportunity to hit that too. And the Iranians are prepared for that. So I was telling you about, use the fighters to get in there, while the stealth F-35 fighters to get in there and hit the air defenses, or at least disable them somehow. And then use ballistic missiles, I think. Just missiles or maybe cruise missiles, whatever you can get in there to blast the island and then disable it so that Iran cannot easily recover their oil production. So the way this strategy works out then is that their leadership is injured or crippled, and they're disorganized, and they'll have to pull themselves back together in order to resist the popular uprisings of the popular demands of their people. 2, they won't have the nuclear option. They will take away their ability to build a bomb and try to form a new deterrent there. And 3, destroy their economic capabilities, right? So that they can't continue to finance terror and finance the corrupt lives of the leadership and their children, right? So, they should go for that. Donald Trump says they should hit the nuclear sites. That's out there. He's already said that much. And there's every possibility that they will do just that. So Israel's options are on the table. What are they going to do? We'll know soon enough. And I don't know. I've heard some things I can't talk about, so I'm not going to say anything about that. But I don't have anything near a complete picture. Just, I've heard some ideas, but I would never compromise those. Let's just say Israel is in really good position to go, hit Iran and give them a really good kick in the kick in the quill, in the cojones, whatever you want to call them, right? In the stones. And they'll reel from it. And maybe it's not today, right? Maybe the regime survives another couple of years, but in time, it will weaken them and they will go. Obviously, Israel's working on the proxies, but here's a really good opportunity to hit the real problem, the head of the octopus, right? And get the central nervous system of these tentacles of terror that reach out to Yemen and Iraq, Syria, to Lebanon, and used to reach out to Hamas, but Hamas is basically ineffective now, so there's not much point there. But don't doubt that Iran would rebuild Hamas if they could. So really have to be aware of that. The war against Hezbollah, of course, continues. Operations in southern Lebanon. Israel has done an excellent job blowing up tunnels and destroying terror infrastructure and a bank associated with Iran, which, probably just eliminated. I'm sure a lot of this terrorism is financed in cash. So a lot of that just went up in smoke. In Israel's operations there along the border, as they slowly close in to establish a security corridor there and, eliminate Hezbollah infrastructure, they're coming pretty close to UNIFIL forces. And with UNIFIL, I wanted to take a note. There's a great interview on the Hoover Institute Foreign Policy podcast. It's, interviewer is Peter Robinson with Condoleezza Rice, who's at the Hoover Institute. And it's talking about, ostensibly about her book, Which Way America. And in it, they were talking about a few things having to do with Lebanon. And she noted, of course, that as Secretary of State, she was there when they negotiated UN Resolution 1701 that put UNIFIL in southern Lebanon. And the idea was that this would be this independent organization, UN organization, that would disarm Hezbollah. But that never happened. The authority to go out and actually enforce was never given to them by the UN, and so it ended up being useless. I think UN Resolution 1701 is going to be that last attempt by the U.S. It was almost 20 years ago. The last attempt by the U.S. to get the UN to do the right thing, despite itself. Holy mackerel. UN is completely useless. So now UNIFIL soldiers are complaining that, an Israeli tank happened to back in through a fence or something while it was making a smoke screen, and then it left. Their UNIFIL forces are getting caught in crossfires and this kind of thing. My friends, the UNIFIL shouldn't even be there. They should have withdrawn them a long time ago. There's no point in their being there. They're not doing anything. They are disarmed zero. They've done zero disarmament of Hezbollah, right? They've captured zero missiles. They've disarmed zero terrorist paramilitary operatives. They've done nothing about their terror infrastructure. You've got pictures now from the IDF. If you follow America Israel Insider News, which is my account on X, there are pictures of tunnels, Hezbollah tunnels that are right under UNIFIL observation towers, right? You can't tell me they didn't know that tunnel was there, right? They've done nothing. They are useless. The UN is now the largest state sponsor of terror in the world, right? It's useless. Get out of the UN. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Anyway, but Condi Rice was talking about that. She mentioned a couple of other things in her talk on that interview, so it's worth a listen. About America's position in the world, American power, and how we maintain that. Now, to a certain degree, obviously, we don't want to be as interventionist as the Bush administration was. I was not a fan of that administration in its time, especially because of the warmongering. But at the same time, looking back, someone like Condi Rice would, although she might herself take it too far, better understand how to maintain U.S. power in the world. And one of the points she made that I thought was really brilliant, and I'm going to discuss it a little bit more in the next segment, is that, democracies are resilient. Here we've seen in the last few years that as, Ukraine faced invasion by a tyrannical a massively more powerful, on paper at least, tyrannical power, that Ukrainians who have democratically elected a leadership that they intended to fight corruption and bring them into the EU, in Volodymyr Zelensky, they have resisted Russia, and quite well. Right? They basically halted the Russians now, and now Russia's calling for help from their other allies in the axis of evil. Meanwhile, Israel has come under this terrible attack. There was the horrors of October 7th, and for the last year, Israel has fought back ferociously and with determination. Right? They've defeated Hamas and obliterated Hamas's infrastructure in the Gaza Strip, and now they're going after Hezbollah. Right? Okay, so that was just a fair point. I mean, she made some really good points. Like I said, someone I might disagree with about a lot of things. Like I said, I don't like to be interventionist. That's why I support World War III by proxy. For the most part, we should do this as a proxy war. All we have to do is help Ukraine, help Israel, help Taiwan, help South Korea, resist these evil would-be occupiers, and we win. Like, when they win, we win, right? Ukraine wins, American power, secure. Israel wins, American power, secure. And Taiwan wins, South Korea wins, or there is no conflict. Now we have Xi Jinping out there telling his army to prepare for war, right? Anyway, so interesting thing there. I'll talk about more of that in the next segment. All right. So, as I was saying, Israel continues to operate against Hezbollah. The UNIFIL guys, the UN soldiers are getting in the way a little bit. So that led to my aside there about Condi Rice. But this is, the Israeli operation against Hezbollah has been excellent. The Givati Brigade, the Golani Brigade, the best Israel has to offer is going up there, and they're clearing it out. I kind of thought this would happen sooner, but whatever the timing of it, go get them. We're going to be heading into the winter months now. It's not going to be a really great time to have a conflict in Lebanon, but whatever the timing, Israel needs to finish this and finish it now. They have decapitated Hezbollah. Let's not give them the time they need to seek succor, right? To rebuild their organization, to regain their leadership, to pull themselves back together. We got them with their pants down. Let's not let them pull them back up. You know what I'm saying? Let's finish this. Devastate Hezbollah. And that brings up the next question, which is a really brilliant point that occurred to me. So the day after in Gaza is complicated because Israel's going to have to maintain a force there. They're going to have to be in control of Gaza, as I've talked about before. It'd be nice if something else could be established there, but it's going to have to be Israel in charge, rebuilding Gaza and making that place a better place. In Lebanon, there's a day after already. Lebanon has an army. Lebanon has a government of Christians and Sunnis. They have the ability to go in once, the army is too weak to confront Hezbollah now. But once Israel has obliterated it, they have the ability to move their army into southern Lebanon as Israel withdraws and take charge and really go after Hezbollah. Let's not forget that the Lebanese government is backed by, the Saudis, the Emirates, right? And they have a lot of Western support. Lebanon used to be a majority Christian country. Now they're like a third. And the Sunnis in the northern part of the country also don't want to be run by Iran, right? They want to have influence over their own country. So the day after in Lebanon is actually a really easy thing. Once Israel's done, kicking Hezbollah around, the Lebanese army can take over, secure southern Lebanon, and Lebanon could be a real state again instead of a failed state. So that's an easy thing that they can do. So the day after in Lebanon is a little easier than the day after in Gaza. Rebuilding Gaza is going to be complicated, and it looks like Israel's going to have to do it itself. Of course, if the people of Gaza would return the hostages, turn on Hamas, and give up their racism, in a generation, in 20 years or so, there could be a Palestinian state. And in the meantime, we'll spend our time rebuilding Gaza and trying to build something better there with better people leading. Who knows? In any case, it would be nice. Right? It would be certainly better than the alternative, which is everybody living in tents because Israel has had to bomb Hamas to defend itself. Right? All right. Great interview recently. Jordan Peterson and Naftali Bennett. Naftali Bennett, the former Prime Minister of Israel. That won't be a surprise to longtime listeners who remember when I commented on his government. Naftali Bennett was a tech engineer, tech entrepreneur and engineer. He developed some startups in the U.S. and such. And he went back to Israel, got involved in politics on the ostensibly the far right, not so far right. There are people farther right now, but really he had a really great interview with Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson handled the interview very, very well and had really good questions for him. But one of the interesting points that came up, speaking of this whole day after thing, you get all these people, it's only going to, Israel's operations are only going to cause more terrorism. Well, if attacking the terrorists to defend yourself or ignoring them leads to greater terrorism, I'm going to go with attack personally. If you just let them fester, it gets worse, right? So going after them can't be any worse. But one of the points Bennett made is that in 1944, no one was running around screaming that bombing Germany was going to create more Nazis, or that bombing Japan was going to create more, fanatical Japanese soldiers fighting for the imperial doctrine, for Yamato Damashi, right? This is not how that worked. As Bennett said, because Peterson was pointing out, they say you can't kill an ideology. And Bennett said, yeah, but you can show that it failed. And that was a very good point, right? Anyone walking around in Berlin in 1945, in Hamburg, right? Anywhere in Germany, and especially with U.S. or Soviet, French, British, whoever's troops marching around, it was pretty freaking obvious that Nazism had failed, right? That letting a psychopath run your country, willfully, they knew he was a nutter before he took office. No one can argue that we didn't know. Yeah, everyone knew he was a psychopath before he went into office. Maybe that was a bad idea. Maybe Nazism was wrong. If you look at the polls of Germans conducted in the 1950s, they weren't any less anti-Semitic than they had been a decade earlier. And there were still undercurrents of nationalism. The point is, if you look at the surveys, Germans hadn't changed their attitudes. That generation from the 30s and 40s really hadn't changed their attitudes much in terms of their core beliefs. What changed was they saw that Nazism failed and led them to ruin. Meanwhile, especially for those in the West, and of course these polls were only conducted in West Germany because the DDR, the German, the communist Germany, Russian Germany, East Germany was not, someplace we could access. But anyway, so in West Germany, they saw the American system and adopted it. The American way was better. And you can't argue, they made a better Germany. Right? The Japanese did something similar. The people bought into the American way of doing things, and Japan is a better place for it today, right? America's not out to destroy Germany. We were not out to destroy Japan. We fought them until they surrendered, and then we rebuilt them and made them better places, right? And better peoples to this day. Okay, so, great point, Bennett. So now, hopefully, the people of Gaza can see that racism against Jews and support for Iranian-backed terrorist organizations, or terrorists in general, has led them to ruin. Will they change their minds? Probably not. But at the very least, I think people are recognizing now that, that it led to some of their suffering. So there you go. Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, Mackie, he was so tough before the elections, talking tough about Ukraine, talking tough about a bunch of things against Hamas, and he was doing a great job there for a little while, and then he had the election where the far left, the populist communists won in significant part because the center left ensemble, Macron's party, and the NLF, the various coalitions of these communist populist parties that are sort of titularly run by Jean-Luc Mélenchon, they got a win, right? They control the Assemblée Nationale, Parliament. So now you have, Macron's been forced to appoint a far left government, to handle domestic affairs. That's kind of how the French system works. The premier, prime minister, runs the cabinet for domestic matters and the president for foreign matters. Since then, Macron has been entirely sans cuit. If you're French, you'll know what that means. Anyway, he has been without his manhood. He's talking about they're gonna embargo Israel, and Israel should remember that they were established by a UN resolution. And meanwhile, he's been he's come off all the tough talk on Ukraine and opposing Putin. So as I've said, I mean, France is well positioned right now to be the power in Europe for the first time since Cardinal Richelieu, right? Louis XIV. It's at this point they're well positioned, but they're also French, and so they've got ultra right wing nationalists running around, and these populist communists, and the traditional parties have collapsed, and you can count on the French to shoot themselves in the foot and the head, and not necessarily that order. Anyway, you can count on the French to sabotage themselves at their moment of glory. Oi, Gewalt. So we've been pointing out to Macron, Israel was not established by a UN resolution. Israel accepted a UN partition plan, and the Arabs rejected it. Israel fought for its independence. Israelis earned their independence on a battlefield, just like the Minutemen at Lexington and Concord, and George Washington at Yorktown, right? And Eamon told the story of the Comte de Lafayette, who was there by Washington's side when Cornwallis surrendered, right? When the war ended. Anyway, the Israelis fought for their independence. Israel earned its independence, and Israel will do whatever it has to do. We don't care what the French think. We don't need France. And they need to come off their high horse. But, since the left won there, Macron he's been pretty awful. Anyway, okay. Last thought, Bibi's star seems to be rising politically with all these military operations that have been going on. So we'll see how the counterstrike goes. And that will inform how things go from there. But as I was saying, I mean, what I told you, 6 months ago is still true, right? That right now the political situation in Israel is, Bibi's future electoral prospects for winning, losing, or whatever really depend on how the war goes. And at this point, it's going pretty well for him. So we will see. With that, I will go to the international news segment. As I alluded to earlier, I've been talking for some time about this World War III by proxy. It's not another Cold War, right? We're engaged very actively in proxy wars now. And even with the Cold War, it's not entirely clear that the United States needed to engage in quite so many conflicts. Korea, certainly. Vietnam, not so much. More on that perhaps another time. In any case, we have this axis, what people call, the 3.5 or 3+1 or whatever, if people want to call it that, because, no one trusts North Korea. Well, maybe, but now they're involved in the conflict. Apparently 12,000 Korean troops are in Russia training now for, to be engaged in combat, right? And, I've been saying it. I've been trying to say, Russia, Iran, China, North Korea, they have been working together. These people, the Americans have this idea that, there's no sign of coordination between them. But I've been talking about this for a year now. You guys know. You're insiders. Of course. You're the smartest people out there. You know this stuff because I've been telling you. But there are all these people out there who don't know. They don't get it. They don't understand. So it's just... this is one of those things that, oh my God, it is an axis. They are allies. They are working together. And now we have it for sure. So Israel is kicking the snot out of Iran. And I think that's going worse than anyone anticipated. So concerned for their ally there. Russia's war is obviously going far worse than anticipated. So North Korea is getting involved to help there. And now, as if, on cue, Xi Jinping is saying, he's telling his military to prepare for war, right? He may know that whatever they're going to do, they probably, he may think they need to do it before January, because on January 20th, America's leadership will change, and they may be in a very different position at that point. Who knows? My hope is that the current administration has just enough elan, guts, maybe even chutzpah, bad attitude. I'll take bad attitude at this point. Just enough to keep them at bay until, should Donald Trump win, he goes, to take office. If Harris wins, it's war for sure. They don't have any respect for her. They might wait until February or March to attack, because then they can relax a little bit. But they're going to. They do not fear. So a vote for Harris is a vote for World War III openly, unfortunately. And I really wish that weren't the case, because, there are problems on the right too. I do not like how Donald Trump has handled the Ukraine issue in particular, but he's handled everything else fairly well. But I remain critical. I'm still your shadow president. I still criticize when I have to. I don't like the way Trump has handled Ukraine or talked about Ukraine. But when he was in office, he armed Ukraine, and he worked well with Zelensky, and I think they'll work well together once again. The key is that, if the war is going to end, the only way for it to end is for Russia to suffer a defeat. And Putin's not going to negotiate any deal whatsoever that leaves a democratic Ukraine that can join the West, because it's an economic threat to him, right? All this stuff of saber rattling about NATO. It's not NATO that Russia's worried about. It's the EU. If Ukraine joins the EU, then they're economically integrated with Europe, not with Russia. So the Russians can't corrupt them as much. Joining the EU means fighting corruption, as Zelensky has done. And corruption is how the Russians maintain control in Ukraine. Grease the right palms and you control everything. So if that corruption goes away and Ukraine is economically integrated with the West, and they begin pumping their natural gas and their oil and providing food and their resources to Europe and becoming an economic powerhouse, Ukrainian people will be happy. They will not be voting for pro-Russian candidates, and they will not want to be part of Russia, right? Ergo, they need to conquer them and force them to be part of Russia. And morally, the United States cannot allow other countries to expand by force. I don't care what your position is. I've argued with a couple of people lately who are just so passionately attached to the Russian narrative. They refuse to hear any other fact. And, I'll say, well, look, all of our European allies stand with Ukraine. What do you say about that? And the globalists. And, oh, God. Okay, the globalists, and it's like, well, the people of, Britain stands, and then like, well, the British government, Keir Starmer, they're terrible. Whatever you think of the government, the people of Britain, the people of Germany, the people of these European countries, Poland especially, they support Ukraine. 350,000 American soldiers died liberating Europe. We can't just hand it over to Putin. That would be pissing on the graves of our veterans, of our soldiers, who were lost there, and on our veterans over here, buried over here, who didn't die there, but struggled and sacrificed, right? We can't do that, okay? So anyway, people getting emotionally attached to foreign narratives is really frustrating, because it's all built out of the same lies that support anti-Semitism. And that's what's right behind it. Tucker Carlson goes over to Russia and pro-Putin propaganda that he spews. And then he turns right around and comes back to the U.S. and starts spreading all the more overt anti-Semitic, narratives. Right? He was doing it before. Now he's doing it even. So it's like, somebody asked me the other day, well, certainly, Tucker Carlson has said something good. You can think of something good, he said. And I said, I can't think of a thing. I don't listen to anti-Semites and I don't listen to traitors. Right? If I trust someone's opinion, it's because I believe that opinion has value. I don't listen to haters. Right? The only time I would cite an anti-Semite is to point to their hate and talk about, what they said that was hateful and why no one should listen to them. So anyway, we have to recognize that tribalism is dangerous from both sides, right? The woke went tribal first. We'll give you that. And they have abused us on the right. And I'm there too. Okay. I've been abused too. A great deal. But that doesn't mean that we all just band together into our own echo chamber and get all emotionally tied to the idea that we're all good and they're all bad, because then we become woke. Right? We're no better than them. If the whole point here is we want Donald Trump to win and for us to have some national healing. Again, wokeness has failed. Right? You can look at Chicago, you can look at Detroit, you can look at California, New York. Wokeness has failed, right? And Donald Trump's re-election is the definitive moment where wokeness has failed. It's a failed ideology, and we need to start moving the country in the other direction. And a Republican Senate and a Republican House will help do that. It's kind of the way it looks right now. In any case, we have this World War III by proxy. And, there are times I hate being right, but I have been right. So if you've been listening to me, oh, Isaac, I'm not sure you're right. I'm sure former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, as I was developing this idea, and I published a show and then I read his article, he wrote about this last year, right? Talking about this new axis of evil, right? Venezuela's kind of been on the sidelines of that too, but they can't really do much. So, thankfully that's there. In any case, I'm not the only one talking about this. We are very much in a war, all right? This is World War III. It will be overtly, World War III with our forces engaged in combat if we do not have the guts to see this through. We are so close to winning, right? All Ukraine has to do is to be able to defeat Russia, and Israel is defeating Iran, or at the very least kicking them in the shins, right? Give them a really good, knockdown blow, and we can keep them, contained. In the meantime, we have North Korea. So they're sending troops to train in Russia. They're going to help fight purportedly in Russia, in Kursk, and in areas that have been captured, areas of Russia captured by Ukraine, right? That's purportedly where we suspect that they're going. Though they may appear on other places in the front lines. They may provide some logistical support. They may be engaged in artillery bombardment. Clearly, these are the fodder that, Kim Jong-un doesn't care about them. If none of them come back, I don't think he really cares. He just, as long as it does something for him, or, that he imagines it does something for him. Meanwhile, President Yoon in South Korea has had to step up their security status and ramp up preparations for war because the North Koreans have blown up the bridges that connect the two. And there has been some fire exchange between both sides in the process. So that's really dangerous. North Korea has isolated itself once again. So they're going back down this road of war and what have you. That'll bring me to my next point in just a second. But first, I can't help, as your shadow president, having just finished, I've been finishing Neil Ferguson's books at record pace, and I just finished his book on Kissinger, which was brilliant. Great book. What you love and hate of Kissinger in office. And, a lot of people didn't like a lot of what he did. It's a great book, a great read, and it's got my gears turning. It really made me think, and I'm developing some ideas of my own based on it. But you guys know me as a strategy guy, right? So as your shadow president, I am going to give you my policies. And some of you have asked for them. Like, Isaac, what do you think we should do in Ukraine? Every now and then somebody asks me that. Well, now you're going to find out. You haven't even effed around, and you get to find out. And in a good way. I believe in the no-nonsense approach. Now, if I were president like Donald Trump, probably we wouldn't be in this situation because I draw a hard line. Anyone who wants to engage in peaceful trade, peaceful demonstration, protest, whatever, I'm happy to treat, and negotiate and work out fairly pragmatic ideas, but not concede, right? Like we're gonna win our way. I'm gonna drive my agenda. If I were elected president, I would be elected in part to drive an agenda that the voters voted for. So I would move that forward. One of which is always security, right? So in this situation, assuming I became president now, so Kamala Harris retires as VP, Joe Biden nominates me as VP, I'm confirmed, and then he resigns, and I'm president now. God, it would never happen. But, if you're going to have delusions or fantasies, have good ones, right? Anyway, so as your shadow president, here's what I would do. I would make an announcement that now that North Korean troops are in Russia training, just for that, just for that and that alone, that escalation, and that they're planning to go into combat, I would allow Ukraine to use U.S. weapons to fire into Russia. Right? We've been restraining them from that. They're not allowed to use our weapons on Russian territory. I would lift that restriction, and I would tell Putin, as long as there are North Korean troops in Russia, that will be the case. When the North Korean troops leave, when they go back home, I will remove that permission. They'll be restrained once again from firing into Russia with American-made weapons. Anyway, I would then go a step farther, because of course this is a chess game, right? And it's like if you're threatening my pawn, I'm going to put a knight there to protect it, and I might even put up a bishop. And if you want me to sacrifice one of those pieces, I'm going to make it hurt. So I would go a step farther, and I would say, if North Korean forces are seen in combat, right, when they are on the front lines, right, that I would take an escalatory step. I would consider that escalation, and therefore we must escalate on our side, which would include, but not limited to, newer and better weapons for Ukraine delivered quickly. So like Ukraine immediately gets some heavier firepower, tighter sanctions on Russia as well. These are including but not limited to, right? So that's just part of it. I would contemplate perhaps a no-fly zone from the Dnipro west and up the 215, so Kharkiv, that area, basically from Kharkiv and the Dnipro west, right? A complete no-fly zone, kind of like with Israel. American forces would be there shooting down NATO forces, American, German, Polish. We would be in Ukraine on the ground with air defense weapons and in the air over that territory, shooting down anything that comes into that territory, and perhaps even a backstop. Just imagine NATO forces 10 kilometers behind the lines, right? Preventing any serious Russian advance deeper into Ukraine. If you make that statement, and if President Biden said that, let them fire into Russia until the Norks leave, or if they end up in combat, and they may have already, but if they end up in combat, then we're going to take some of those escalatory steps to defend our ally from attack by a second foreign aggressor, right? This is ridiculous. In that situation, it creates a serious dilemma for Putin, because if he puts those troops on the ground, and he desperately needs them, he has a chance to drive the Ukrainians out of Russia, right? But he'd also be having to weigh how likely is President Isaac, right, the shadow president. I mean, I'm already on the Elders of Zion, right? So I already run the country, but anyway, I'm turning on the hurricanes, right? But he's got to calculate then, how tough is the president of the United States, and what's he going to do, right? Because newer high-tech weapons, more sanctions, and a no-fly zone, a backstop. These are dangerous things, and that's somewhat ambiguous. I haven't said which one of them I will do. I haven't said which one I won't do. That's the thing. All this stuff, well, we can't do this, and we can't do that. That would escalate. God, we're a bunch of wimps now. The dictators are happy to help one another. It's another point that was made in that Condi Rice interview. The dictators have shown themselves very willing to support each other and help each other. But we're not being very helpful to one another, the free countries of the world. We're equivocating. We need to be stronger. All right. So that's what I would do. And I have a strong feeling Putin would back down. And if he doesn't, I'm not backing down. So whatever threats I've made, I would follow through. So there would be some significant step. One of those four things, or two or three of them, would happen. Okay? And that would be a serious problem for Russia, right? But if they're going to have North Korean troops fighting for them, I don't see why we can't have Polish, German, and American troops ready to fight for Ukraine, right? If we're going to start bringing in other countries, this is no longer a localized conflict between Russia and Ukraine, then it's now an international conflict. It's now a world war, and we're going to go intervene in it because we have to. It's in our interest to do so. Letting Russia get away with using North Korean troops is not okay. Okay? That needs to stop. So that's that. Last point here in this segment before I close out the show, because I'm probably already running long, is we get a lot of this talk, and I have heard the question asked a few times, why didn't we pry these countries apart, right? They are allies, and why didn't we pull them apart? Why didn't we bring some over to our side? And you hear this argument all the time. Apparently this is something, this is a Tucker Carlson thing, or something like that. Anyway, it's a narrative that's been out there. One of the things that is frustrating is that there's a certain narcissism about our perspective, a combination of ethnocentricity and narcissism. We assume that everything's about us, right? The Iranian regime is run by nutters, by psychos, by violent, power-hungry men, and that's not our fault. Like, they are that way. They want the things that they want, and they don't care what we want. Right? They're against our interests, but not because of anything we did, but because they don't like us. They want to destroy us. They have made their choices, right? I mean, after the Cold War ended, the United States reached out to Russia. We provided all kinds of financing, aid, food. Even while the Soviet Union still existed, we were providing food. We helped them out. We tried to make Russia, or not make it, tried to encourage Russia to become a better country. And it didn't work. The Russians, democracy didn't work there. Yeltsin was, his presidency was kind of a train wreck. And in 2000, he handed the presidency over to Vladimir Putin. Been stuck with him ever since. So Russia had every opportunity to, to be our friend, to come over to our side, to be like us, to change, to become friendly. And they didn't. Right? It's not like when, Nixon went over to China and pried them away from the Soviet Union. They were already having problems with China. The Soviet Union and China were already having issues with one another. And separating the two really gave us a strong negotiating position in Vietnam. And it was that and the bombing that ultimately led to peace there. And so we won the Vietnam War. And then after Nixon's resignation, the North invaded the South again, and we lost because we refused to go back in and stop it. You could argue that you could have just done things the way Walter Lippmann suggested and just not gotten involved in the first place. Was South Vietnam really a place worth fighting for like that? Anyway, so again, a different question for a different time. But because I've been reading about Kissinger, that's foremost on my mind lately, the history of that. As you can tell, I don't think that we should have been involved in Vietnam, and I do honor our veterans who fought. I'm not saying that. Politicians start wars. The men and women who went on and fought and served as, women served as nurses and in support roles. Those who went over there and fought, I honor very much. They have guts. Those are real men for sure, and tough women. But I just don't think they should have had to fight there in the first place. Just me. Anyway. And that's not the only war I would say that about. So, anyhow, we tried. Now, Iran, Barack Obama sat down with their leadership. He and John Kerry negotiated, tried to get them to give up their nuclear program. I mean, if the Iranians wanted to, they could have given up their financing for Hezbollah and Hamas, or at least reduced it. They could have given up their nuclear program. And the sanctions were basically lifted. They could have become, modern Western country. Even as a dictatorship, they could have improved their healthcare and education. They could have invested all that money back in their country. But what did they do? No, they sponsored terrorism, right? They had the opportunity. We reached out to them, okay? Trump reached out to North Korea. He sat down with Rocket Man, Kim Jong-un, and they negotiated a sort of a deal, a thawing of relations, right? And then the Norks came back and they were going to meet in Vietnam, and they had this big grand deal they were going to do where the U.S. would withdraw from South Korea, and Trump, and the U.S. negotiating team and Donald Trump were like, no, that's not what we're here to talk about. We had this other deal that we were going to do, and that's it. We're not doing this big thing, and no, there's no U.S. withdrawal from the peninsula coming anytime soon. And so the whole thing broke down. But if Norks wanted to come over and be friendlier with us, if they wanted to work with us, if they wanted money, right? I mean, that small deal could have come with a little bit of something, but, it would have led to larger deals and economic trade, and maybe some aid could have gone to North Korea. The point is, if they wanted to, All right. China has had every opportunity. I cannot even tell you. Most favored trade nation status. Well, we had great relationships. We had, Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao had good relationships with Western leaders. China charmed their way into the halls of power. All they had to do is keep going in the direction they were going and keep being friendly. And everyone would have made every excuse. And those of us, myself included, because your gregarious Vulcan is outspoken, you're a mad genius. I'm always, a little bit on the street corners shouting. I have seen China, the danger in China for many years since since the 90s. Like I was warning about, we shouldn't get too close to China. We really need to be suspicious. And, as Trump said, like we need to be more transactional. Like if we're going to have, give them most favored trade nation status, then they need to give up, policing free speech. Like there needs to be more freedom, right? And so on and so forth. But we were never transactional. We just gave it away. Again, all four of these powers have had every opportunity to befriend us, to separate, to come join us, right? And they have not. Okay? Now, if the Iranian leadership is weakened and the people of Iran rise up and they overthrow the nutters and they join the civilized world, we will welcome them with open arms, with tears of joy. The Persian community and the Jewish community in the United States are very close to one another as they are in Europe. There's a lot of good friendships there. We have a great relationship with the technology Israel already has. If the Persians were free of that and free to innovate and improve their healthcare and improve their system and their infrastructure, God, Israel could help them catch up. They could unburden them from the past, right? And move forward unburdened. Because they could help them get caught up very quickly. And Persians are very high-tech people, very smart, very industrious, very scientific. They understand technology. Iran would be a powerhouse economically very soon, okay? It could happen. We'd welcome it. If the Russians wanted to change sides, so Putin ended this war and then says, you know what, my mistake, we want to be friendly with the U.S. It's a little late now, but I mean, years ago he had every opportunity. Bush negotiated great deals with him on, we're going to reduce our nuclear arsenal and they're going to reduce theirs. And then he didn't really reduce his nuclear arsenal. He didn't follow through. Right. So we tried. Okay. They have chosen to be where they are. Okay. They made their choices. Okay. Hitler chose to invade Poland. He chose the war, right? It went well for him at first and then badly. That's his choice, okay? Stalin chose to be where he was, right? He chose ultimately for his own survival and benefit to work with us to defeat the Germans, right? Instead of negotiating a separate peace. So, he did what he wanted to do, all right? They made their choices, all right? So we can't go and run around all the time, oh God, we've been so mean, we've encroached on the Russians. No, we've done everything. We've bent over backwards to give the Russians room, to invite them into NATO, not as a member, but to be with the NATO Council, to observe, to participate in leadership, to see everything that's happening. We did everything we could to help the Russians. They're just not interested in that. They want domination. And their willingness to try to expand their empire by force, to conquer other nations and incorporate them into their empire, shows you how backward their thinking is and just how imperialist they are, okay? That's not our fault. We didn't do that. They did that. That's Vladimir Putin and his cronies, okay? So with that, I'm going to end this episode, and we'll be back. I'll be back with the next episode to talk about the Israeli strike, and watch for the walking videos that I make between episodes. And hope everyone, Hag Sameach. Hope everyone's having a great Sukkot, and we'll go from there. With that, I will say, as always, goodbye, Lehitrot.
Writers of the history, stand with me. Look into my eyes and see. People go away but never say goodbye. Someone stole the moon tonight, took my light. Everything is black and white. Who's the fool who told you boys don't cry? Hours and hours and flowers. Life is no game for the cowards. Why the time goes by. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. Living in a fantasy, ecstasy, everything is meant to be. We shall pass, but love will never die. Hours and hours and flowers. Life is no game for the cowards. Why the time goes wild. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. October rain. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. Känner feeling schon en markon, en åt i lejon. Kolom hela din tuffi